Hey noble ones, welcome to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and I've got to show you something really funny. So if I write insider and then I write historian, I was expecting to get, all of those videos made by Insider, which is, I think, the channel from, Business Insider, that have to do with, historians reviewing stuff, which is usually the kind of content that I enjoy making React videos to, and commentary videos, sometimes even debunking videos. But here's the thing. So we get Ancient Warfare Historian rates 9 more battle scenes in movies, so I guess there is another one. Oh, there we go. Ancient Warfare Expert rates 10 battle tactics in movies, so we'll probably be watching that. How real is it? All the way down to how 20 cheeses are made around the world, regional eats. Is that mozzarella, by the way? That's a mass. Yeah, food marathon. For a moment I thought it said food Metatron. Man, I should make a video on mozzarella. More food. How Domino's became the world's biggest pizza chain. What the heck? Why? Oh, because they made it. Okay, Still though, I am saying historian, so with a history of cheese. Okay, scratch that. We got this guy as well, but I love this guy. I love smash burgers. Anyways, let's stop that. Let's jump into the video. Oh yeah, boiling oil thing, yeah.
So boiling oil didn't happen. Sorry. I mean, you can just throw boiling water. Hi, my name is Roko Nainadag. I'm a lecturer in ancient history at the University of Oxford. I'm an expert in ancient warfare, and I'm here to talk to you today about pre-modern warfare in Wonder movies.
Okay, let's go. 300.
So this is the supposed Greek concept of othismos, which it literally means pushing. And about 100 years ago, a scholar in Oxford who clearly had rugby on his mind decided that this should be conceived as a literal mass shoving. We have no evidence of that. Nobody ever says that that's the case. But for some reason, this really caught on. And so for the last 100 years, it's been controversial. But generally speaking, I mean, people didn't want to fight like that. Spears are right in your face. So
not to mention Greek spears and Macedonian spears were extremely long. So if the enemy gets in contact with your shield, that's a problem, right? If you take a moment to think about that, it shouldn't happen. They shouldn't get to you. They will. That's why you have the shield and the armor. But in theory, you want to keep them at distance and keep spearing them to death.
There's a lot of reasons to want to avoid this.
Yeah.
So this moment where they switch from fighting information to going after individuals who are still resisting, that seemed very realistic for most of these fights. Make sure you can kill as many of them as possible, because that's when they're vulnerable. That's when they're not fighting back. So that's when you can just sort of spear them in the back.
If it's a moment of retreat, I would agree. I don't think that was a moment of retreat in the movie, if I remember correctly. But generally, I agree.
And that's exactly what happens in this scene. It's only very much later in Spartan history where they say we don't chase the fleeing enemy, because if you chase the enemy, then you're caught out of formation, you become vulnerable. But at this time, in the time of the Persian Wars, the Spartans had no rules against this. And indeed, it's a true story. You can't really dispute that. But in sense of the tactics and the weapons, it feels like a fantasy movie. Maybe 3 or 4 out of 10.
Well, it is a fantasy movie. To be fair, this movie was based on a comics. So it is a fantasy movie. I'm surprised that it didn't say that, but they're wearing nothing. They're fighting almost naked and to show their bodybuilder physique. Not to mention the helmets look horrible. But yeah, that was not the thing. Spartans were professional, and therefore they were the most armored of all the Greeks. If anything, we should see them clad in bronze and linothorax and spolas and all of those different variations and in-betweens with the scales. Yeah, they should be clad in armor. That's the fantasy element in reality. Well, this is fantasy, so it's elves. And orcs.
If the old man's in range, why isn't everybody shooting? They're making all these people on the walls hold their arrow for a really long time.
Yeah, that pisses me off too. I agree with the historian here. When it comes to war bows, holding it is insane. Particularly if it's like longbow level, like Mary Rose 15th century 120 pounds long war bow level. At that point, you can't do that. Yeah, no. Also because those bows, to really maximize the penetrative power and distance and range sometimes, although then again they are often used in close distance too, but you have to pull them all the way back to your ear. And medieval archers had been training since they were children. They absolutely could. By holding it like this, it's stupid. He's absolutely right. With that being said, the fact that one tries a sniper shot and succeeds in hitting an enemy in the face does have historically happens. Sometimes, even if they're not yet engaged in actual combat, an archer, if he's a good shot, could try a single shot because maybe the opponents don't think that they are in range, or maybe they don't think they are in danger. And so maybe someone of importance has a visor up. I think you know where I'm going with this, Henry V. And so a single shot from an archer that tries and then succeeds to hit them in the face, absolutely historical.
And these are really heavy bows, so it's exhausting.
But yeah, he's right. Oh wait, I'm getting no sound. What happened? Oh, they cut the sound so they don't get copy claimed, of course. Sorry. I think we're still going to get copy claimed anyways.
Plate armor is intended to keep arrows out. Bows aren't guns. They are meant as suppressive weapon. You use it to keep their heads down. And so, of course, you would still use it.
That is a strange statement to make. Let me roll it back because I don't know what he said. So he said plate armor is not going to be penetrated by bows. I agree. Neither would plate armor be penetrated by early firearms, by the way. But let me see.
Plate armor is intended to keep arrows out. Bows aren't guns. They are meant as suppressive weapon. You use it to keep their heads down. And so
no, you use it to kill your opponents as much as you can. I disagree with the historian. Archers were incredible at finding the... Yeah, if you fire... shouldn't say fire, but if you lose a shot and the arrow hits center of mass where the medieval guy has got heat-treated breastplate and placket combination, not gonna go through. Still, the ricochet from that could hurt someone on the sides who's less armored. With that being said, a lot of precision shots were done in medieval warfare, so they could hit you on the side, maybe on the side of the helmet. They could hit you where you only have mail. But regardless, yeah, not everyone is a medieval knight. Now, in this case, these are orcs. But then again, they do have a lot of gaps, and archers were spectacularly good in the medieval period at hitting you in the gaps. So even in a fantasy world, such as that of Lord of the Rings, if these archers are professional and the orcs are coming, but you can see they've got gaps, if you plant and stick an arrow from a warbow inside imagine the clavicle, or even inside like imagine the right or the left deltoid of an orc, and that penetrates through, you didn't kill him, but you wounded him and probably is out of combat. Not that I know orc biology, but you know what I mean.
So, of course, you would still use it even against people wearing plate armor.
Yeah.
Because even the feel of arrows sort of pinging off your armor or falling around you is going to make you much more cautious and hesitant.
True. Oh, they had to remove all of the... Yeah, I understand that. I know, I get copy claimed all the time.
Obviously, attacking walls with ladders is just a really, really risky proposition and usually doesn't work. If you believe they don't have either the courage or the strength to resist you, then you might try this. You just put a lot of ladders against the walls, swarm up, take the place. If you expect it to be defended, it puts you in such a position of vulnerability, approaching the walls one at a time, and it's just not going to go well.
Yeah, there are some instances in ancient Roman warfare and tactics where they do use this tactic, but it's because they have a diversion. So they did a frontal assault on another section of the fortified village or whatever it is, fortress, and so all the troops are over there dealing with your attackers, and then you have a secondary kind of commando team or a secondary portion of the army that actually takes advantage of a lower section of the wall where maybe the natural environment actually pushes up a little bit because you've got a little bit of a mountain hill, and you can climb it and put the ladders and then take it while they're not defending it or not manning it enough. That has been done. So it kind of depends on the context.
But obviously it is a very common tactic. I mean, you can go to the British Museum right now and see depictions of people assaulting walls with ladders. Yeah, so I mean, the problem when you see this kind of siege scenes in movies is that they always seem to make it really easy for the attacker. If they want to go right up to the wall, they can just do that. If they want to bring siege engines, if they want to bring catapults or rams or towers up to the walls, they can just do that. It's like they're trying to make it possible for this place to fall. Whereas in reality, I mean, one of the most common forms of fortification is very simply, if you have the ground like this, you dig a ditch and you pile up the sand behind it.
That's a nice animation, look at that.
Build your wall on top of that. And now what do you have? The enemy wants to approach you from the front. they end up in the ditch. Suddenly the wall they're facing is much higher. If they want to bring siege towers or battering rams, they fall into the ditch. They would have to fill up the ditch first before they can get to you.
Which they did.
All that time, they're right under your walls. In movies, they never do this because that would slow things down. I want to keep the assault engaging. That's why a lot of the tactics that they show you are actually too simple and missing a lot of the points.
That's actually excellent. Excellent point.
Would actually be used.
So epic.
Well, firstly, that hill is much too steep, so everybody would die. But these horses would just slide to their deaths, unfortunately. But if we...
Was it really? I don't know if he's joking, though, because, I mean, it didn't look that bad to me. But I think he's joking.
If we take that out of the equation. I always thought it was validated by the fact that he uses the light of the sun to blind the orcs, which means they lower their pikes at the last moment. So the idea is that he creates those openings that the horses need to see in order to push their charge. So you see them sort of wavering and breaking just before the charge hits, which is exactly the point. Like that makes...
Interestingly enough, this happens in the medieval period, not the usage of the sun, but oftentimes one of the problems with cavalry charging infantry, even compact infantry with spearmen, okay? The problem is keeping them there and keeping them steady. So in this case, the wizard Gandalf is using the sun, and yeah, great. But in the medieval period, when you have a cavalry charge of heavy cavalry, plate armor cavalry, or even earlier mail with helmets, whatever, the spearmen would rout and then they get massacred. It's really difficult. You need to have very highly professional, trained and possibly veteran spearmen to mount a strong defense, but it's just every single man stands the ground and waits for the cavalry to charge and tries to impale either the horse or the guy, because of course there's a lot of cavalry, so even if you manage to block a couple, the rest of the cavalry is coming, and then it's very scary. And so that was a problem. That's why cavalry was so effective, because it was difficult to find spearmen that were willing, or even in general, like militia warriors, even with swords and spears, even with swords and shields, that actually were okay standing the ground against a cavalry charge. It's really difficult, and it needs a lot of morale and veteran trained soldiers.
Conceivable that this could have worked. I mean, it is still a fantasy, and they're doing many things wrong. On the other hand, it certainly hits a number of points where you're like, well, this is realistic, using sort of layered of initiative in order to overcome the defenses.
And it's awesome. Lord of the Rings, it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10. This is just wrong.
Yeah, this is bad. This is bad.
I mean, what are they doing here? Like, where are they getting the idea that the Scots in this period were wearing like leather and war paint? Like these, I know. These are just like ordinary.
Those are the Picts.
Medieval infantry. They would be wearing chainmail and helmets like this, you know. They just
I hate the term chainmail. I would just say mail shirts, but still.
Deliberately made them into savages. Why would you make them into savages? They're sophisticated people.
Yeah.
They had disciplined pike formations. It's
absolutely
so bizarre. So fire arrows are not entirely unhistorical. They did exist, but usually you would use them during a siege assault, for instance. Like you could use them to set things on fire, which is what they're for. So buildings and, you know, stocks and supplies, wood, and straw, thatch roofs, because it would create chaos and distractions. This idea of involving fire in battle scenes is just something that Hollywood loves. I mean, you just want to have fire because it's... Also, how would they have done this without the English noticing that there was a field of oil or something on the ground? Like they wouldn't have like been like, oh, that's probably there for no reason. I'm just going to stand in front. They just do this. All these movies, they just sort of charge into each other like horses lancers.
They run. Yeah, the infantry running doesn't really make sense. They would have advanced slowly in formation with shield walls, and then they would have started trying to hit each other and, you know, maybe outmaneuver each other. The cavalry often, at least, I liked the cavalry charge in this movie, even though, as he says, it has a lot of problems, but it was really cool to watch. And it was certainly better than, for example, I think it's The King, the one that the cavalry charges with swords. I'm not joking. They go like this with the swords, instead of using lances. At least we got lances here.
They just sort of mash into each other, like no regard for anything.
No formation.
And then, like, when people ask me, like, so in a battle like this, like, how would you know which one is on which side? Like, how would you know who to stab, basically? Like, yeah, you wouldn't, obviously. If it went down like this, you would have no idea, which is why it didn't. As soon as your formation gets so messed up and so disorderly that the enemy are in your ranks, you know you've lost. Now, infantry would often charge into battle in the sense that it would run the last distance to meet the enemy.
I disagree with that.
Because everybody's afraid. Nobody wants to be there, really, because they know they're about to be in mortal danger.
So maybe did I misunderstand him?
Your ranks, you know you've lost. Now, infantry would often charge into battle in
I disagree.
the sense that it would run the last distance to meet the enemy, because everybody's afraid. Nobody wants to be there, really, because they know they're about to be in mortal danger. So you run and you scream to get yourself through that point.
I completely disagree. There's no reason to think that they advance slowly in formation.
And to psych yourself up and to know that there's a lot of you who are all in it together. But then you probably, by the best modern theories, you'd sort of slow down when you get to the enemy. And then you would start stabbing at each other in more or less even lines. Because otherwise, you would just lose control. This is a joke. I mean,
Not to mention, what the heck is that armor? What is that?
From the equipment to the tactics, none of this has any bearing on what actually happened, except that William Wallace was defeated. That's basically it. 2 out of 10 or 1 out of 10.
Yeah. Ooh, Gladiator. Fun.
That's one of the most common forms of ancient artillery, is these bolt shooters. They would shoot these big rods.
Yeah, including Scorpio.
These sort of metal bolts. They're very effective. They shoot further and more accurately than arrows.
More accurately, it depends, though. On the statement of more accurately, it depends. Archers could be incredibly accurate.
There's an account of somebody getting, blown off his feet and pinned to a tree by one of these things. They are very useful in a siege because, again, they clear the walls. You don't want to stand there.
So what he said now is anecdotal, in the sense it depends which type of, because sometimes, yes, artillery can be used against fortifications and battlements, but don't imagine like an entire massive stone wall to be destroyed by Scorpio, because that smaller fortification or wooden fortification absolutely needs mention in the sources. So it kind of depends.
I mean, what is the point here? This forest is clearly very wet. It's not going to burn. It just looks cinematic.
It is. Testudo.
And they form a testudo, of course they do. Yeah. I mean, it's not ridiculous. I mean,
why not? They're getting shot at, mate. I mean, I'm pedantic, eh? I'm super pedantic, I know that. But then again, yeah, if the Romans get shot at and the movie maker says do testudo, I don't see anything wrong with that. That's when they used it, and during sieges.
They did have a formation like that, which is called testudo. And they did use it in a few occasions when you knew you had to pass through a bunch of arrow fire, and you didn't want to lose any casualties. But it's a desperate measure, so then you're stuck waiting essentially for the enemy to stop shooting at you.
No, it's not a desperate measure. I disagree with him. Maybe he's not a classical historian, because he says ancient, but he says ancient warfare expert, though. It's strange from an ancient warfare expert to say this. You can move in testudo. We reenacted it. We can absolutely move. Testudo is a little slower than other formations, I imagine, a little bit, but still, yeah, you could totally keep moving. You're not stuck in a place in testudo. You can't move until they stop shooting. That's nonsense. You can absolutely close the gap in with a lot more safety, and then you can start attacking. And then if you don't need to have testudo anymore because they stopped shooting because you're attacking, or maybe someone else did, maybe cavalry did their jobs, maybe other wings did their jobs, so that infantry can do what they do best, which is facing people face to face. Very strange statement to make.
So in a battle situation, you wouldn't want to waste your time trying to get into that formation and then waste your time trying to get out of it again when the enemy's right there.
Waste your time. Professional soldiers, mate. You were a little pedantic on the movies, I'm going to be pedantic on you. These are professional soldiers. They can do this like this. When it comes to the Romans, they drilled this a lot. And once again, isn't it better to lose a little bit of time but decrease the number of losses from that ranged weapons than to just keep walking and getting continuously struck by arrows? If that happened, it happened. The Romans did use the testudo. It's an excellent formation and can be tactically used. Of course, there are situations in which you wouldn't use it, but here I don't have a problem. And you know me, I can be very critical of Gladiator, but in this case...
Instead, you would just try to get through that zone and get into the thick of it.
Do not be troubled, for you are in Elysium, and you're already dead!
It's an endless debate whether those speeches actually happened, because it's hard to speak to an entire army full of people, especially without a microphone. But it is something that is very, very common in descriptions of battles.
Yeah, I think up to a certain extent it probably did happen. As he says, he probably wouldn't hear everyone. Not everyone could hear it, but still, the front lines, and the front lines are the ones that are going to impact the enemy first. So I believe so.
So the best we can do is assume that they did happen and that they were a very important part of it. So the cavalry here, bizarrely, charges through a forest. This is really bad idea. Your horses are going to break their legs. Like
I mean, it's not a thick forest, but...
Wouldn't you try to find open ground?
One thing I'm noticing with this historian is that he makes suppositions and statements that are a little very, very subjective, in the sense that, oh, that hill is... all the horses would have died in that hill because it's too steep. And then I look at it and I'm like, I don't know, man, it doesn't look that bad. I've seen much worse people pulling it off. And then in this case, oh no, the forest, the horses would have broken all their legs. I don't know, man. I mean, it doesn't look that thick of a forest. It's like the very last section of a forest before a clearing. I mean, they did film it in the movie, and I don't think the horses broke their legs. So the statements sometimes are very strange. I agree with a lot of the things he says, but sometimes he comes up with these statements that kind of make it feel like he's providing entertainment at this point, but they're not really based on anything, just a personal opinion at that point. With nothing wrong with it, but I'm just saying I kind of can't disagree. Well, why would the horses break all of their legs?
I mean, it uses a lot of actual Roman tactics and equipment, so I guess 6 out of 10, but it's a mishmash.
Troy.
The whole point is just that they're just doing Saving Private Ryan. This is just made up because they wanted to have a scene like Saving Private Ryan. Resisted landings are not common in ancient warfare because they're kind of a modern warfare thing. Most of the time, they would just find a suitable beach somewhere a reasonable distance away from their target and land there, and then they would advance on their target.
The Romans did that a lot in Britain.
These are just stakes for show. Who are they going to stop? Like, they're not trying to land tanks here or anything.
Not even tanks, cavalry, but the stakes like that were used by English archers, for example, to counter cavalry. But yeah, in this context, I agree with him. It's kind of weird.
People can just walk through them.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to fortify anything, in antiquity, in the Middle Ages, in the modern day, ditch and a palisade. It's that simple. It's easy. All you need is a bit of wood and some shovels. And they haven't done it. They just put some stakes up here and there for no reason. Just kind of sprinkle some stakes.
I kind of did that in Valheim, and it works with the monsters because the monsters are stupid.
Stakes. This kind of shield formation is total rubbish. I mean, come on. There's nothing like that in Greek history. They're not going to be like this overlapping sort of turtle thing.
Hedgehog, yeah. Oh.
In the period where this poem is set, there was no mounted cavalry. And even in later periods, you rarely have people actually fighting on horseback. It's hard to work out how to use cavalry tactically. It's difficult to use it if you don't have very many of them. And horses are just very precious. It costs an enormous amount of money to maintain a horse. So you don't want to waste your horse on something like this guy.
I don't know, though, because I'm not trying to be like countering everything he says. I'm really not trying to do that, and I apologize if I sound a little condescending in doing that, but Macedonian cavalry is a thing. When he says in this period, I wonder what he means exactly. Because, I mean, Macedonian cavalry is a thing, and it was absolutely used.
Charging altogether.
Yeah.
They have no sense of order.
True.
And in fact, if you look closely in one of these scenes, just to the left of Paris, after the next shot of Paris running away, I think.
Oh no, he fell. Ooh, I didn't know that. That's so cool. And terrible.
The extra falls down on his face. I mean, I love that bit because it just shows exactly why you wouldn't want to be doing this, right? Because if everybody's running all together, you're
not to mention you'll be exhausted before you even reach that. And the other side has a very disciplined formation that marches forward at pace, but not like that. I think they would be at an advantage when it comes to endurance.
Gonna trip over yourself. Like, everybody gets in each other's way. Like, they're doing a beach landing, which is obviously inspired by an earlier movie. It has nothing to do with history, except that they have swords and arrows. What do you want? 2 out of 10?
Okay, so, well, I don't want to react to the entire video as always, so go watch the original for the other movies that he's going to review. But up to this point, it was an interesting... I've disagreed a few times with the expert, but then again, let me know what you think, because maybe you'll agree with the expert and disagree with me, or maybe you'll double down with me. Whatever it is, I appreciate the comment, and thank you so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow for the next daily upload. Goodbye.